Okay, so this is just to introduce you to the CaBezel molds in case you're not familiar with them. If you already are familiar with them, you can move on to the next video. So we have several different designs available in the CaBezel Jewelry Molds. This was one of the original ones, and it is called Geometrics, and it just has your basic shapes: square, rectangle, circle, and oval. And if you don't already know why we named them the CaBezel Jewelry Molds, it's because one side helps you create the cabochon, the other side helps you create the bezel. So we combined the two words and came up with CaBezel. Now these are tools that help you master the art of consistency, really, with one-of-a-kind jewelry. Also help you you know, if you do a lot of production work for craft shows, or even around, you know, certain times of the year when you're doing a lot of gift giving, this helps you be consistent and it helps you save time. So anyway, back to some of the designs. This one's called Paramount, and these shapes are quite big. I happen to love oversized jewelry, and I wanted a spot where you could, you know, showcase a picture or a texture or, you know, a veneer in a big way. This one is called Organic. This one is Blocks and Dots. So far they were all from the original CaBezel mold line. Then we came up with something called the all-in-one CaBezel Jewelry Molds. Now, they work very similar, but different. So here's an example. This one is called Dragon's Eye. And this is just a big oversized pendant. We also have these two molds that help you create cuff bracelets. So this one is called Single Thick because you end up with one really thick cuff bracelet. And this one is called Triple Thin. Oh no, something like that. So as you can see, there are three different pieces here. You can choose to keep them all together and have one really thick cuff bracelet, or you can keep two together, or you can cut them all apart and have three singles. So they work a little bit different. You don't end up getting a cab, but you do end up getting the bezel for your bracelets, and then you can fill that with whatever type of veneer you like. The next one we came up with was the Holy CaBezel Jewelry Molds. 7 different shapes, named after 7 women in my life. So anyway, let's move on a little bit. I just want to show you that you don't have to use the bezel and the cab together like I've done here. So I made the bezel, baked it, then I made the cab, shaped it inside the bezel, and rebaked it. Pretty simple process. But I wanted to let you know that you can also use the bezels on their own. So here's one that after I baked it, I cut a piece of paper and put it inside. And then I coated this one with resin. I made another one where I used some leftover crackle veneer, and I cut that to size, put it in, added some liquid clay, and rebaked it. You can also use the cab all by itself. And for the Holy CaBezels, you don't even have to cut that hole out. You can leave it in there, and you could insert a complimentary, you know, veneer or a piece of paper. There's so many different possibilities. You can use a few of the molds together, like this one combines minis with one of the smaller lemon egg shapes. This one is one of the 3 fab focals and lemon egg. This one was one of the very first ones I ever made, and it is using the organic mold, which is what we're going to be using today, plus one of the minis. And the cabochons are a great way to use up some of your cane veneers or your favorite canes. Good way to really showcase them. Another way you can use the bezel is by, cutting them and setting them into another piece of textured clay. That's how I did this one and also this one. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to show you the very basics using the organic mold, and this is what we're going to be doing. Let's get started. We are going to use this organic CaBezel Jewelry Mold. It's a popular one. People seem to really like the organic shapes. And for the cabochon, I decided to use the Cernit translucent clays. Use a thin layer of translucent clay over top of white clay. I was playing around and I just really liked the effect. I like how it kind of has an inner glow almost. Anyway, let's get started. We always start with the bezel. That way we can, once it's baked, we can start working on the cabochon. And today I'm going to use the metallic bronze. Don't forget, whenever you're conditioning a metallic clay, that you always have to put it through the pasta machine in the same direction. So let's get started. Always, 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 unless I say otherwise, make sure you are working on patty paper. But it's just so much easier to manipulate your clay if you can spin it around while you are using your scalpel. So make sure the clay isn't hanging over the sides at all, or else, it could stick to the tile and just frustrate you. So we're all ready to go. 1 layer, thickest setting. Can't remember if I showed you the difference or not. So here is one that I did on, I'm going to say 1 layer of the thickest setting and then another layer on maybe the second thinnest or thinnest setting. Here's one obviously done with just 1 layer. These are the minis, so you can go thinner. You just have to make sure that you don't go so thin that when you're putting pressure on the mold, it's going to break through the clay and tear the clay. So I would suggest always using the thickest setting of your pasta machine. Okay, so we do need to use some water as a release on the mold. My acrylic roller. And all I'm going to do is hold it upright and start using my roller in a circular motion and then straight up and down. You should be able to see when the clay is starting to go up into the mold a little bit. So you can see here that the clay is up into the mold here because it's darker, but not so much over here. So I always like to go in one direction for a bit. And then because I'm right-handed, I tend to kind of lean towards the right a bit. So then I will turn it and go the other direction. Now don't expect your masterpiece the first few times. I would suggest doing a practice run of a couple first so that you're not disappointed. As you can see, that didn't take very long. And it comes off quite nicely because I used water as the release. What I would recommend is you take a little bit of paper and very lightly get that water off of the clay. You don't want it sitting on there. Okay, we are now ready to cut this bezel out. At this stage, you can decide, do you want to cut it right up against the edge so that it resembles this one? Or do you maybe want to, create a bit of texture and make more of a frame? We could do something like this, and go all the way around. We could, poke it with a round tool. We could do all kinds of things at this stage. Do something like this. And then what you could do is just freehand it. Something like that. But today we're just going to keep it simple and cut right along the edge. So make sure that you're using the sharpest scalpel or X-Acto blade that you have. Otherwise, you're going to feel the drag and you're going to see the drag on your clay. It's sort of going to stretch, and you don't want that. You want a nice clean cut. So I always put a little line where I'm going to start. I make sure I don't touch the actual side of the bezel because I don't want to put a mark in it, especially when you're using metallic clay. It's a good thing we worked on paper so we can spin this. So put the tip of your X-Acto blade in right up along the edge and keep holding your blade parallel to the side of the bezel. And then you only want the tip in. You don't want to have half of the blade sticking in the clay, just the tip. But once you get the hang of this, you'll find it so easy to do. You'll be making multiples in no time. So I'm not even really looking at the end point, but I see that line coming up, so I know I'm almost there. And there we go. So it's all cut. Now carefully cut the clay, because we don't want to take this bezel off of the paper. We want to leave it stuck there. So remove the excess clay. Get that out of the way. Ta-da! So this is almost ready for the oven, but sometimes there is a little bit of a burr where you've started. So we can get rid of that now if you don't want to sand it later. I have a soft paintbrush and I can use it to just smooth the side of this bezel. Hopefully you can see. So I'm just going to smooth this gently. I can't put much pressure on this or it's going to slide off the tile. Okay, so our bezels have come out of the oven. They are cured now. I just wanted to say a few things about the bezels. If you're finding that they are puffing up on you when you're baking them, there's a really easy fix for that. All you have to do is get a pin and prick a hole or two in there before you bake them. That way there's somewhere for the air to release and you won't get those bubbles. Another thing I wanted to talk about was choosing the thickness of your bezel. It all depends on the end use for your bezel. If you're going to make a dainty little pair of earrings, you don't want it to be really thick and heavy. You want them to remain light. This is a pair of earrings I made a long time ago. And although they're still fairly light, I wouldn't choose to make the bezel that thick ever again. This is using the minis, and you can see how thin these are. This is one thickness for these minis. And it is probably the thickest setting on my machine, maybe a little less. I used to always do 2 layers. I would do one on, maybe the thickest setting, and then one on a medium thin setting. I'm not going to say that you necessarily should do it that way. Like I said, it all depends on the end use of your bezels. The only thing that you have to keep in mind when choosing your thickness of clay for creating your bezels is you have to make sure you have enough clay to get up into this mold. Okay, and while the clay is getting up into this mold, this part of the mold can't wear through the clay through to your tile that you're working on and tear. One final tip for the bezels. Once they have come out of the oven and they have cooled, you may find that the bottom edge feels a little bit sharp to the touch. Okay, if that bothers you, I would suggest using a piece of wet dry sandpaper, misting it with water just to keep any dust down, and taking this baked bezel and just rubbing it like this. It doesn't take very long at all. It just gets rid of that sharp edge. And the sides as well can be sanded quickly the same way. And in no time, you'll see that all the roughness has gone. And it's as simple as that. That's all you have to do, because the CaBezel mold has done most of the work for you and made everything really smooth. That's it for the bezels. Okay, now we're ready to make the cabochons. Our bezels have all been prepared, they've been baked, they're cooled, they're sanded if you want to sand them, so we're ready to go. Now I suggest you make your cabochons thick. So you want to roll your clay on your pasta machine on the thickest setting, like I've done here, and we're going to stack 2 layers on top of each other. And the reason we're going to do that is because cabochons are typically, they're rounded, a lot of times out of stone, and they're meant to stick up above the bezel. That's what cabochons are all about. So here are my 2 pieces of clay. I want to make sure we don't get any air bubbles. Okay. And we're going to be working with a very thin piece of the Cernit translucent to get this effect, like the look of the inner glow that I got when I had white clay underneath. So we're going to work the exact same way we would be working if we were using a cane veneer or any other type of clay veneer. So this is one where I use some canes, okay? So I've conditioned this, rolled it through the machine on my very thinnest setting, and okay, so try not to get any air bubbles in there. Let's see, what one will we work with? Let's work with this one. Okay, so that's the bezel. This is the cabochon. In this particular organic mold, they happen to be side by side. They're not all like that, so you may have to, give it a second look and just make sure you're doing the right cabochon. So once again, I'm going to spritz this with water lightly, just so it doesn't stick to my clay. Water is a release. Make sure it's in the right spot. Place it down, and same as before, we're just going to use the roller and get the clay up into the mold. And hopefully you can see here that it is starting to get up into the mold. You can see the slight different color there. That means I have a little bit more work to do. So let's take a little peek and look at that. See, wasn't that easy? When the clay is nicely conditioned, it goes up into the mold very quickly. Now, I like to keep some tissues on hand so that I can dab that water up. It just makes it easier to see when you're cutting, or else the water can create a bit of a shadow. Again, we've worked on paper for a reason. Take your sharp scalpel, put a little mark where you want to start, hold your blade parallel to the clay, and just turn the paper. I've grabbed hold of the clay, obviously. I'm not just spinning the paper. So now, if you don't want to waste this, because this is a veneer, when we're working on the bezel, I cut it in a few different spots, pulled the pieces off. Well, you may not want to do this because you might want to preserve your veneer. And if this was a cane, I probably would have been a little bit smarter and worked my first shape over here and then saved myself room on the veneer to do, one or two more cabs. You can see how high that is, how thick it is. Okay, and perhaps you've noticed another problem. We have white clay underneath. Now, if you were going to be putting this into a white bezel, that may not pose a problem whatsoever. But today I'm going to show you how it looks in our metallic bezel that we made. So we have a little bit of work to do to cover that up. If you are to avoid this step and having to cover it up, if you're using a cane that's, let's say greens, you should try to use some scrap clay underneath that is in the same color family so that you don't really have to work so hard to cover it up. Okay, so we have our bezel. I'm going to carefully take that off so that I don't misshape it. And I am going to place it into our prepared bezel. So as you can see, it's a pretty darn good fit. Although there is a tiny bit of space around the shape, and I have done that on purpose because I wanted to be able to fit it like a custom fit in there. I didn't want to just plop it in and be done with it. To me, that didn't look very professional. So it was designed with a little bit of space so that when we are manipulating the cabochon, there's room for it to expand into the bezel. So as you can see, that doesn't look very nice where you can see the white. So we're going to fix that by rocking our thumb over the edge. Now you're not pressing very hard at all. You're just slowly trying to stretch the top colored layer over your white clay. And in a lot of cases, it could be scrap clay, but as you know, we're using a translucent. So I have gone around once, and I'm never in a hurry really to, speed it up and press too hard. I'd rather take my time and go around maybe 3 times. It depends on how warm your hands are, how warm the clay is, how warm your room is, the brand of clay. And as you know, this one is Cernit, and it is stretching beautifully. Now, we could really be done if we didn't have white clay underneath. Like if you're using a cane veneer, you're going to have the matching color clay underneath, or you might just be doing a solid. Also, if you're using a caned veneer, if I think I just said that, you could choose to cut a thick slice of your cane and put the mold over top of your cane. You don't have to use scrap clay underneath. Now going to take one of my flexible blades, because as you can see, I've sort of touched and gone, well, actually more than touched, I've gone over the inner edge of the bezel there, and I don't like that. So what I'm going to do is just take my blade and hardly put any pressure on it at all. Oops, and just make my way around. Try not to touch the cab. Unfortunately, because we did use white underneath, I'm going to have to do a little bit more manipulating there. Thing I didn't mention is because this is a cab, it's supposed to be domed, it's supposed to be higher in the center. So when you are touching this, when you're manipulating it, don't let your thumb go anywhere near the center. Your thumb is just concentrating on the outer edge. That's it. So we're not touching this at all. And you'll notice that as soon as this comes out of the CaBezel mold, because the mold is very smooth and shiny, it makes your clay smooth and shiny. Took this over to my buffing wheel and honestly buffed it for a few seconds, and look at the sheen I got. And you can kind of see, a bit of a almost like a halo on the outside where the clay got thinned by stretching it a little bit. And I just like that effect a lot. So we could stop here, put this in the oven and bake it. And I do bake the cabochon inside this bezel. Like, do not try to dig this out and bake it. The whole point of putting it in the baked bezel is so that you can shape it and manipulate it. When it comes out of the oven, a lot of times, depending on what brand of clay you're using, you can just go like this, give it a little bit of a bend, and the cab will pop out for you if you need to separate them for some reason. Like sometimes I'll have a bunch of frames made, and then I'll want to make the cabs, and you know, for whatever reason, I may decide that I'm going to do some work on the cabs later, and I don't want them in the bezel. So this one I've scratched up, I added a bit of paint, you know, rubbed it back. Well, I don't want to be adding paint to the bezel, so I wanted to work on the cabochon all by itself. The magic of video, this is done. It's come out of the oven. And that's how it looks. Next step, finishing off your CaBezels and turning them into a piece of jewelry. Okay, so now that you have all of these beautiful baked cabochons in their bezels, what next? What do you do with all of these? I'm going to show you a few of my favorite ways to finish these off to make jewelry. Of course, it's not limited to jewelry. If you do scrapbook covers or, you know, clay journal covers or something like that, they're kind of fun to embed into clay. But for now, we're sticking with jewelry. So let me get that out of the way for a minute. I just want to show you how many different possibilities there are for finishing these off. You could simply put an eye pin on the back of a single finished CaBezel and attach it to a bail. So before we get into that, let me just show you a few different examples. So here's one that I made years ago, and what I did was I attached two different pieces together, and then I just formed a channel. I keep some extra Buna cord hanging around, the offcuts. Now this one is too thin, but I'm assuming I would have used a piece of 2mm Buna, laid it down there, covered it with clay, used my name stamp, and then baked it in the oven. When it comes out, you just give the Buna a little twist and it pulls right out. So there's that idea of making your own channel with clay. No extras needed, which is wonderful. Here's another example where I did the same thing, a little bit differently. Now, when you're attaching a couple of pieces together, I don't like to just put the clay on the back. I think you need a wire to stabilize that. So that's what I've done in both of these cases. Here's a newer one that I started. I haven't quite finished yet. I took a piece of steel wire that was probably 20 gauge and folded it in half, put a nice fun little loop there at the bottom. You know, you could always dangle something off of that. But the way I would have done that, well, I'll tell you that in a minute, actually. So you can see the wire, and that's because this is metallic clay and everything shows. What I typically would have done before I baked it was push this nice fine texture thread into it so that you wouldn't see any of that. And up here, again, I would probably put my custom name stamp up there to cover that up as well. So just one piece of wire bent, and then this makes it really stable, really secure. So this one, I've made a bail out of polymer clay. So I just had a thin sheet of clay. I didn't put an extra backing on that one. What I would have done is just simply, you know, cut a piece up there and then rolled it over something and attached it with liquid clay before I baked it. So there's that idea with an added bail. Some can be as simple as, like I mentioned before, just adding an eye pin. So let me move this back over here. I have several different bails. If you're going to stick with something simple, you know, keep it just one piece or, you know, two pieces together. This is quite small in scale. What you could do is you could place this on rock clay, on a sheet of rock clay. So, of course, I'm going to work on paper. So you're going to place your pieces down. This is probably, you know, the second thinnest setting. It doesn't have to be very thick. And what you're going to do is once you make sure your pin is long enough, you're actually going to put some bends in this so that it can't pull straight out. So I would use my pliers and then put a few little bends in there just to make sure it's not going to pull out. Okay, so you know, you can kind of mark where that is, cut it. You know, you're going to scrape this up, give it some tooth, both of these pieces, scrape this up as well. It's all cut out. Then you're going to place this down. There's no clay up above that part, and add a little bit of liquid clay and bake it, and you're good to go. Okay. So that's one way to do it with a simple eye pin. Now, if you have an eye pin, if that's the way you're doing it, then once it's baked, you have a few different options for hanging it. So here's the soft glass, and here is a bail that just has a simple loop there. So this eye pin lends itself perfectly to that. And you would just unbend the eye pin, slip it in there, and you are good to go. And I think that looks quite nice. If you wanted to stop the bail, and you know, when you're wearing it, if you wanted to stop it from shifting, you would just put an O-ring on each side, and that would keep it where you wanted it to be. O-rings are great for that. Another simple idea is, of course, to just use a glue-on bail, right? Make sure you keep it in scale with your piece. This is just one, so you don't need a huge bail. This is flat on the back, which is lovely. What I would do is scratch that up, give it some tooth before you apply liquid clay, or of course you can use your cyanoacrylate, your super glues. They work well with polymer clay, and you know, you could call it done like that. I would prefer, again, to put a piece of clay over there, probably put my name stamp on there and rebake it. That way you know it's secure, it's not showing, it's hidden, and it's never going to come off. Okay, now here is, another idea is I will often make brooches. Okay, so one last idea, and this is probably the most complicated one, is putting together two or more of your finished pieces. So as hopefully you can see, there's a piece of wire here. And I could have chosen to completely hide that, but I thought I'd make it part of the design. But the reason I put that in there was to make this nice and stable. And I'm thinking what I'm going to do now is either put a pin back on there so that I can wear it as a pin, or I can convert it and put it on a cord with my pin converter. And this was pretty easy to do. So of course you need a backing clay. You need to decide what ones you want to put together. Once you have figured out your arrangement, You are then going to lay it on a piece of conditioned clay, right? So let's just say this is the arrangement I'm going to go with. So I've conditioned my gold clay. And now I'm going to figure out how I want these and the size. Once you figure that out, push these down really hard so you make a mark. And then you're going to take a piece of copper or steel wire. So if you're into copper as opposed to black, like with this one I use steel wire. 19 gauge, just black annealed steel wire. I love working with steel. I really do. I love the look of it. You can shine it up a little bit, or you can leave it black. You probably just want to put some Ren wax on there or something to seal it. I haven't sealed all of my steel jewelry. That said, if there are a lot of steel components in there, I will put some Ren wax on it just to keep it from rusting if it gets wet. It is steel after all. So this is another option. This is, you know, the old school clip-on earring. And these are wonderful to embed into polymer clay. I probably wouldn't want to use it on a small piece like this. I may use it on something like this, or I may prefer to use it on, you know, on a piece that I'm using more than one element, just because this is a little bit chunky, and when you close it, it does have a little bit of depth to it. So that is also a big bonus because you can use thicker cord. So this soft glass is 4.5 mil, but we also have 5 mil Buna cord, 4 mil, 5 mil, 6 mil. I'm not sure this would go on the 6, but this is also an extremely versatile method. So I was mentioning before, if you happen to do craft fairs, you could use this for your backing for a lot of your focal pieces. If you sell cords, or, you know, let's say your customer has, you know, her perfect leather cord that she loves to wear. Well, this just gives her another option. She can buy one of your pieces or several of your pieces because she can then clip it onto any cord she already has. So you'll want to hide it a little bit down there. Just make sure when you're positioning it that it is hidden. Right? So that's you know, probably 1/8 of an inch down, and that will be good. So now back to this. Once you figure out how it's going to go, you need to cut yourself a piece of wire. And what you're going to do is figure out what configuration you need. You might want to keep it so that it's completely hidden. So you want to go small and then, you know, have this hanging around. Okay, so something like that. That's totally going to be hidden over there. Just cut that. So there. Now you still have time to play with it and bend it. Okay. Now, if you want to do it like I did and have it show, that's another option, right? So when you're bending the wire, you're going to bend it to a bigger shape. Totally up to you how you do it. Now, this wire, you have to make sure it lies flat. You can probably see, because I was using metallic clay, you can see exactly how my my copper is wound. So what I should have done was, once I had everything all tickety-boo, I should have pushed this into there so you wouldn't see all that. One thing you do have to watch out for when you're using these pinbacks is that this little guy here has room to rest. So you can see mine doesn't. So what you want to do is close that so you can see how much clay you need to remove, and remove that before you bake it, or else it's not going to close properly. And this was just 2 of the molds, the organic and, well, ignore these, but for the main part, it was the organic CaBezel mold and a couple of the mini CaBezel molds. So anyway, hope you enjoyed that. Hope to see you soon. Thank you. Bye.